Most podcasts that I know of start when a host is so passionate about a topic, they just want to have an opportunity to explore it more. I mean, that's certainly how Creativity Uncovered started. But how about if you were given a podcast and a topic to cover by someone else? Does that make it harder or does that make it easier to do? And how do you keep it authentic? Hi, my name is Abby Gatling and welcome to Creativity Uncovered. Through this podcast, I uncover how everyday people find inspiration, get inventive and open their imagination. And basically, I am on a journey to find out how people use creative solutions at home, at work, at play, and everything in between. My goal for this podcast is that by the end of it, you'll be armed with a whole suite of tried and tested ways to summon creativity the next time that you need it. Today, I'm very excited to be speaking with Angela Hollowell, who is a video podcaster, she's a documentarian and a visual storyteller, and she hosts two podcasts, one which she started and another which she was approached to do. And I'm really keen to explore what does that look like and how she's managed it. So welcome, Angela.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Appreciate you extending your workday to talk to me. We were just talking before, it's actually evening time where Angela is. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Now, this is an interesting situation for me because when you mentioned that you were approached to do a podcast, initially I was like, oh my gosh, that is so bizarre. And then I thought about it more and I was thinking, actually, no, we all kind of monetize our art and our expression in this way. That's, us lucky enough to have creative jobs do that. But for some reason, it was just a bit different to me being a podcast. And I suppose it's because my one's so personal to me. So I'm just kind of keen to unpack this with you and see what your experience has been and what your learnings are and just kind of go from there. So for context, Angela has two podcasts. One is Creative Architects, and the other one is the one that you started, which is Honey and Hustle. Do you want to just quickly tell us about those podcasts and how you got involved in each of them?
Yeah, absolutely. Honey and Hustle was started in 2020, March of 2020, which is obviously the only great time to start a podcast during a pandemic. And it was, just like Abby was saying, just something that I was really interested in doing. I had no goals or desires to monetize it. I just wanted to kind of pass the mic, if you will, to people who are doing incredible work in the Triangle. The Triangle is what we call Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill kind of metro area here in North Carolina. And that was great. I got through maybe the first season of about 20 episodes, learned a lot of things to do better, like record better audio and have a better process for onboarding people, and maybe don't use cameras that have record limits, all the necessary things to make a better show, and also how to not forget questions in the middle of a sentence, right? So I learned a lot. You learn a lot really quickly when you're doing everything yourself. And when you're just starting out and learning, and, it wasn't anything I had done previously, hosting people. So it was just altogether a new experience for me. And I've learned and grown a lot from it over the past 3 years. It is definitely fully self-funded. I did start paying editors for Honey and Hustle during season 3. And that was a game changer. Love it. Highly recommend it. Growing a team around a podcast. And I finished season 3 and I was approached by Castos because I was on one of their other original podcasts, and they're like, hey, we see what you're doing with Honey and Hustle. We love the video podcast format that you've adopted. Maybe you would consider, building upon that for an original show for Castos. They pretty much said, our only requirement is that the podcast has something to do with their creator economy, but the premise is up to you. You'll have access to our designers to design the logo and color schema. And you'll also have access to our editors who will help you edit the podcast and distribute it on our channels. So it was kind of like a win-win situation for me, in that I would not have had the time to start from scratch on another show if I was doing it all myself, because then I would be in charge of all the moving parts. So it was nice kind of coming into a team that was already established a little bit, and then just kind of bringing in not only just my skills and talents as a host, but also my skills and talents as a creative director, and kind of be in charge of really, again, just kind of the creative process and the run of show and the guest curation and all of that type of stuff. So super nice opportunity. Is it weird? Not really. I think it's kind of a blessing, because how many people can say that a brand approached them and offered to give them money to do something that they already cared about and loved? I think it's weird when people come to people being brands, and expecting you to be something different than who you are, or fit into a system they've already established that doesn't necessarily match your ethos as a creator. I think that's when it gets kind of hard. But, I wasn't asked to do an audio only podcast. I wasn't asked to do anything different than what I was already doing. In fact, I was asked, really given an opportunity to augment that and increase my capacity. And so that's kind of how Creative Architects got started, because, I was really just thinking about, okay, the creator economy, that's such a broad topic. And there are so many incredible podcasts already doing topics on that. Like, some of the big ones that I listen to on a regular basis, like the Colin and Samir show, or Matt Diavella's podcast when that was up and going, Tim Ferriss's podcast to some degree. And Guy Raz, how I built this. Like, all these things have to do with your creator economy in some way, shape, or form. And I was like, well, what can I add to that conversation? Like, what's not being talked about? What, more importantly, do I care about that I can sit down and talk about for 30 minutes or however long? And how does this add to the space? And so I started thinking about creative communities, like how people are coming together and seeking community in various ways. I started thinking about the rise in creator-led education, so creators building their own courses. I thought that was a really interesting phenomena, especially with like the cohort-based education being kind of intriguing to a lot of people. And then I thought about creative tech companies, which feel like they're popping up like gangbusters. You know what I mean? Like every day I'm learning a new company that's going to help me make better short clips, or help me get better audio from my cell phone or something. So I was really interested in how these companies were like coming about, how they were testing their, market products and things like that. So that's kind of the three premises that we cover in Creative Architects. And I hope I answered your question about creativity. Oh man.
That is so cool. Firstly, congrats that you have produced such a cool podcast with such a nice aesthetic and outcomes and great conversations, that a brand has handpicked you to do this. That's a bloody good achievement. Were you absolutely stoked when that happened, or was it out of the blue, or like how did that actually happen?
It was definitely out of the blue. Like, I had gone on Audience, which is another Castos original, earlier in this year, and I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was great. Like, I thought it did really well on social media, but that's not to indicate how people responded to the audio only version. But I thought it went well. Me and Stuart, who was the host of that show, got along really well. We really bonded over our mutual love of Zane Lowe, who I think is from your neck of the woods. He's from New Zealand originally, and he's an incredible host now with Apple Music and did some time at BBC Radio. So we fell in love over that. And so I remembered him. And he also lives in North Carolina, which is interesting for a remote company that we're both in the same state. So it was cool when he reached back out. I wasn't like, why is he talking to me? Like, but I was like, oh man, this is crazy. Is he messing with me? Like,
That's so cool. I mean, the only other people I've heard that happened to is like celebrities, like was it Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and Spotify approaching them. And I don't even know if that even happened in the end, but that's pretty cool. And also Zan Rowe, that's so niche. I freaking love that. Represent.
Yeah, we love him.
Yeah, and I think that's also cool, because I didn't know that they sort of had come to you with a topic in mind, but you had so much creative freedom with that. For me, I find like it's awesome when you get so much trust, but also when you have such a broad or blank space, it's so hard to know where to start with that. So I know you came up with these three things, but did you go through a bunch of other different ideas and sort of throw them out the window before you settled on those sort of topics?
Yeah, yeah, and I think this goes back to maybe, like, my more affinity to being, really interested in, like, the ideation and, like, pre-production process. Like, I love a good research stint, I love a good brainstorm. So I just had this Word document that I would just throw ideas on. If I got an idea in the shower, I'd write it down, put it in the document. If I got an idea while I was walking, write it down, put it in the document. And then once I got kind of closer, so it actually the premise was actually gonna be, um originally, I was gonna do one topic every season and then alternate. But then, Stuart said, "Well, why limit yourself to one topic each season? Why not, like, mix it up and give people an idea of what they can expect?" And so I think that was a better idea because, sometimes, you have a guest list that wanna get people on, but they're not always available. So it kinda helped with the variety of people I could reach out to as well. So that was really helpful. And, yeah, some stuff too, you come up with ideas and you're like, "Oh, that name's taken. Oh, that show already exists." Or, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, I don't wanna copy what's already been done. I wanna make a new space. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly found that with this one is that not necessarily about the topic, because I was just interested in just exploring the topic myself, but I had another name and I saw someone else had it. But what's frustrating when you come up with like a perfect name, someone else has it, but they're not using it. So there was another
Oh, tell me about
podcast.
it.
Yeah, and I came up with the same. I was like, this is brilliant. And I searched, I'm like, oh no, there's another podcast. Oh, but they haven't done anything since like 2018 or something. So I was like, oh.
It sucks. Yeah, I found a couple like that where people like pod fade, and it's like, you only give it 7 episodes, like, give up the name, like,
Yes.
or they have the social media handles too, and you're like, "Man, this is, like, all the way taken." Like, I
Yeah.
can't get around it.
It's so hard. But yeah, that is really interesting. And it's also hard like choosing a topic as well, because you want to be niche enough that people can find and really cling on to what you're talking about. But and they really just limit how many guests you can find and the pool of people who you can approach to talk about it. So I think it is cool that you've sort of like got a couple of different topics that you can kind of
Yeah.
broaden your search for people. How do you actually find people to be on your podcast?
So it's a mix, and I think part of this, going back to the idea that, most people start a podcast because they're super interested in it, part of it is just being a part of the creative industry and creative conversations online, on Twitter mostly, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. So kind of knowing who are the people in this space that I would be interested in speaking with, and that would be good fits for the show. So some of them, a lot of them I was already following on Twitter, so I was aware of them. And then some of them came to me through, recommendations, um, and just LinkedIn kind of connections. People are like, "Oh, I saw you had so and so on the show. Have you heard of, this company that's also doing this?" And I was like, "Oh, no, can you connect me? Like, that'd be great." And I think some of it too, there's some beauty in being limited and who is a good fit for your show, because I think it allows you to be more focused and more intentional with your conversations, and just ensuring that the people that you have on are definitely going to be like relevant to, the premise of the show. One thing I was listening to, Colin and Samir's show, and one of the things they were like talking about, like, how do you make the best, YouTube video intro? And one of the things is like, once people get onto the video, like once they click, it's like you have to confirm that they are going to get what they think they clicked for. Like they are going to get the outcome that you promised in your thumbnail and title. And I think that is kind of the same thing with a podcast, especially someone who's just viewing you for the first time. And maybe they search for the guest name because you have a big guest name, or maybe they searched for creative or creator in, Spotify or Apple, and this comes up. You want them to feel like, yes, I'm going to get something on the topic of creativity or the creator economy. Because if you get on there and they're talking about their intimate relationship with their dog and how that's, affected their view on life, you're probably going to be a little bit confused. It's not that that's not a great conversation. It's just that's not what you came for, right? And so I try to be mindful of that as well. Like, who can I get on here that, yes, we're going to talk about that and also have fun. So make it a really good mix, but ensure that people feel fulfilled by the podcast episode or the podcast premise.
Yes, yes. And so now you have started and you've got all these episodes out. What is Castos's influence or ongoing commitment or relationship with you like?
You're asking a great question because we're about to finish season 1. So, here's to hoping we get renewed for season 2. I think we will be. But I think they've just been super supportive throughout the process, you know. And I think, you know, right now we're really interested in um, just growing the name recognition around the show and exploring how we can do that either through my personal brand or through Castos's channels. Because as you probably noticed, Castos isn't super big on social media, and I don't think they really want to be, and that's okay. But we really want to, you know, just continue to establish um, creative architects as like a really um, important show. I don't know if important is the right word, but maybe um, show that people should check out. You know, a show worth your time of checking out in the next, you know, 3 to 6 months. I think.
That's cool. I mean, fingers crossed it gets renewed. It's a really cool show. I think there's so many more people you could talk to, and it's just an interesting topic to explore. But do they get involved in vetting your guests or anything like that, suggesting guests and stuff like that to you?
Not really.
Wow. So it's like full freedom. That's amazing. That's really cool. That's really cool. And so this is what we would call like a branded podcast, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what does that mean? What does that mean necessarily? Like, so you said they've given you access to their resources and teams and stuff like that. What else does that mean?
It also means that I don't own the intellectual property rights for the show. So this is a part of the Castos brand. So I will say that. And I think you have to be comfortable with that if you're making something for a brand. That's just out of the gate. But I don't think that's unusual. Issa Rae sold the intellectual property rights to HBO for Insecure. And I think she's done very well off that. And she's created more shows with them and has a really good relationship with HBO. I don't know if I see myself getting $40 million deals tomorrow, but you know, one can dream. And the other half of this is that, you know, while, you know, yes, they came to me and, you know, to create this show, you know, there are things that I did run by them, you know, like I did at least show Craig, Craig is the founder of Castos. I did show him the guest list. So it's not like I'm just like blindly, you know, adding people. We do strategize together on like how to grow the show and how to make it better. We do talk about, you know, some of the cross promotion stuff that I'm doing with other podcasters. And that I went to podcast festivals and, you know, we spoke about that. And then, you know, if you listen to every episode, there's always going to be an ad read for Castos, always. So it's always about pointing people back to Castos because that's you know, essentially what they want. Like, hey, you like this show? Great. Why don't you put your amazing show on Castos? You know, why don't you take advantage of all the amazing features that are making this show possible? And I think it's smart. You know what I mean? Like, who better to, you know, promote a podcast brand than a podcaster? And to have that kind of in every episode, I think is awesome for them and not a huge lift for me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like that detracts from the quality of the show at all. I don't feel like it detracts from my creativity and it's kind of awesome being able to do that every episode and really think out of the box about like how can I craft a video that points back to an incredible feature that Castos has, you know.
Yeah, it's kind of it's like influencer marketing almost, isn't it?
A little bit. If I'm an influencer, yeah.
You're an influencer, podcast influencer. I mean, but it's also good though because you're using the product and you obviously like the product. So that is like a fantastic piece of marketing. I mean, I am in marketing, so I'm just very curious about this
Yeah.
and how it all works.
Yeah.
And are there any other restrictions like that they have said you definitely can't? You can do anything you like, but you just can't do this one thing.
No, we haven't come across that yet. Thank Jesus. No, I think it's been pretty chill and it's been a good partnership.
Yeah, cool. And do they pay you to do this?
Yes, they do pay me.
Yeah.
That's about as much as I feel comfortable saying they do pay me. Yeah.
This is interesting. Like if someone is trying to potentially do a collaboration and do a branded podcast, like they should ask for payment, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
because the
yeah.
goal is to make the brand money. Like, they're not doing it, like, they're not like coming up with the original show just because it's fun and giggles. Like, the majority of podcasters are coming up with it because it's an avenue for marketing for their brand. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this kind of leads us to the creator economy again, I guess, because as I said sort of in my intro, like it makes total sense that people exchange their creativity for money because some people do that. Some people do it just purely for fun and their own personal enjoyment, and that's also great. But there's nothing wrong with actually making money out of your creativity. But I've never really heard too much about the creator economy necessarily. Like what does that actually mean?
that is a great question, and I think many people have different answers. My definition of the creator economy is middle class creators, right? So not, your celebrity podcasters on Spotify. It's like the people like you and me who wake up every day and they're like, I want this to be my job, you know? Like I think this should be a feasible option for me. And this is how I'm exploring making that work and maybe changing the narrative around the words like gig worker or gig economy or freelancer to really think about creators as small business owners and entrepreneurs and really take that element or industry seriously and not just like looking at it as a side hustle. So that's kind of what the creator economy for me looks like.
Yeah, because I always get confused about when are you a freelancer and when are you just a small business? Like, what is the difference there? It's the same thing. You still have to have your own, in Australia, you still have to have your own business registered. You could be a sole proprietor or something like that, but you're still a business if you're freelancing. So,
Yeah.
like, what fundamentally is there a difference, do you think, in terms of those two terms?
I think if we're splitting hairs here, I think they're both, business owners because like you said, here in America it's the same thing. You still have to have an LLC, registered in order to accept payment under that name, that business moniker. And, I think the distinction comes from like solopreneur to entrepreneur when you start like working with other people, essentially. Like when you start hiring subcontractors, when you start becoming a subcontractor for other people, I think that, takes on a different connotation because now one of the things that people associate with the economy is the ability to create jobs, right? Like how can your business create jobs and bring revenue to other people? And so I think once you start paying other people for their time and their services and their talents, then you start kind of maybe going into that entrepreneurship realm because that's a whole other set of paperwork, a whole other set of thinking, right? And demonstrates a certain level of need, right? Because if you could do most of it yourself or all of it yourself, you just would. So I think it's important to recognize too the growing level of creators that are starting to work together because the need is there, right? Bigger projects are there, branded shows are there, bigger commercial projects are available now. And maybe they always have been, but maybe they've only been reserved for agencies, bigger Hollywood level production teams. But now it's like a girl in Durham, North Carolina who is, working on a project and needs, another camera op. She needs an editor. She needs a writer. She needs a social media person. So I think the level of collaboration and co-working that's going on in the creative space is really what's bringing topics like the viability of the creator economy to the forefront. So
Yeah. I think that's a cool I think it's a cool topic that you're covering on the podcast because it's it's for creators who want to make money out of it will make change their hobby or their craft into a business. But not everyone is really business minded and don't know how to do all these things. It's like you have to wear so many hats when you're trying to get into that space. So I think it's really cool, like that your show is even doing that for people, helping bring people together and share the knowledge around.
mm, yeah, and I think that's why kind of the creator education has been sticking out to me because a lot of this stuff that, I learned as a creative business owner and I paid for a course early on. And a lot of things that I see other people learning, like, when they pay for a ship 30 for 30 cohort or something like that, it's like these are things you probably are not learning in college, right? And if you wanted to learn them on your own, it would probably take you a lot longer, a lot longer to build the community that would give you feedback, a lot longer to build a social media presence that would allow for creative community development. And a lot longer to find a mentor that would be honest with you about your work and your writing. And so I think there's something to the extent that, like, yeah, it may seem crazy to pay for a couple $100, even a couple $1,000, but like, what is that in exchange for the long-term sustainability of your business? What is that, in the place of, the time it would take if you wanted to learn it all on your own? And for people that, increasingly are finding college way too expensive here in the United States, like, what is that in place of, a college degree that wouldn't teach you any of the skills you need, in life as a creative business owner? So, and I'm not saying like no skills, like you learn things in college, don't get me wrong, but like maybe not specifically towards the area of creativity that you want to build a brand or a business around. So I think about that often. And I think that that's something really awesome that's come out of this show.
Yes. Are you finding that you're learning a lot of this stuff as well, like while you're having these conversations?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, like, I think there's something to the fact, especially now, I did, and people can roast me for this in the comments. I don't care. But I did take advantage of like thinking big. You know what I mean? Like I'm always like one of those people that's like, if I have an opportunity to dream big, I'm gonna dream big. Like, why not get some of the biggest creators and biggest creator tech companies that I can, right? So I was able to talk to Jen from Passion Fruit about her idea around sponsorship and like raising money for your show. And Jay Klaus around like his, thinking around creative community development and why he created a paid community and what that looks like. And even, Justin Moore of the Creator Wizard, who's like an incredible, yes, on brand sponsorships, but also like how to build a business that like doesn't scare the hell out of you, but also allows you to like make money and do it well and do it in a way that allows you to have capacity to still like spend time with your family and like, create the things that you care about. So I think like all of those things, and there's many more. I love all the people on my show. Let's just put that, they're all awesome. Jeremy Enns as well. He did the Podcast Marketing Academy, super awesome course. So to be able to talk with people like that, people that are, have been in the game for a while, have done it, at scale and are now kind of like packaging something. Like, how do you even package something like that? If I were to get to a place where I'm like, I want to make a paid course on branded communities or branded, podcasts, like, how would I even package that? How would I do that in a way that's sustainable and that like makes it valuable for people? So I think it's just been an all around great experience being able to learn from all these folks and really be able to talk with them for, a couple minutes.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's cool. It certainly is. It's a great opportunity when you have a podcast. You've got this really cool opportunity and a legitimate reason to reach out to people who just spark your curiosity or you want to learn from. So yeah, go take all advantage of that for sure. And also about like thinking big. I think that's great. I know everyone's like, like, dream big and you can do it, but whatever, if you don't actually even cast your mind to that, you'll never actually do it, right?
Yeah.
I think it's awesome that you are, you're talented enough that you've been approached to do this. You're having great conversations that you're learning from, and you're also thinking about how you can apply this in the future. That's such a
Yeah.
cool win, 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 win all over the place. There's wins for everyone right now. I'm feeling sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I will say, because I don't want people thinking like they're going to go on the show and they're going to hear me just talking about what I'm interested in. Like, I also try to make sure that anybody listening, even if they're not a video creator, if they're not a podcaster, maybe they're a writer, maybe they're a designer, an illustrator, an animator, a photographer, that they're going to get something out of it. And that's also something that, I would caution people if you're making a branded show, especially an interview-based show, like, there's a certain level of selfishness that you can have, but also like please keep in mind your audience. Like, like it shouldn't feel like people are listening into a one-on-one coaching call on some level. Like, be mindful of like what anybody who's not in your position would want to know or want to ask, and be interested in to learn as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's why it's so good that you have such a firm focus on what the topic of the podcast is about, is that, as long as you're always keeping that in mind, then your conversations are going to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there
Yeah.
much crossover between your creative architects and Honey and Hustle?
What do you mean by crossover?
Like, do you ever get guests across to one or learnings from one to the other, or either you do keep the two very much separate?
I haven't brought on any guests from Honey and Hustle on Creative Architects. And in terms of learning, I would say yes. Just in terms of, me being a creator, like thinking rationally about how I could apply, some of the learnings to what I'm doing with Honey and Hustle, because that's still self-funded unless anybody watching or listening to this wants to, sponsor your girl. But um so I think some of it, some things that I've had been considering too is like, you know, if I'm going to do a community, what is that going to look like? Because for me, I always want it to be accessible. So what would a free and a paid community look like? Could I have it in the same place? What are some of the things that I would want people on the free tier to have access to? Um, and how can I make it sustainable, right? Because a lot of people, let's say Patreon, a lot of people start Patreons and then they quit because even though they're making money, they can't sustain the amount of content that they promised. And so it just becomes like another job. And so I think about that as well. And, for example, a paid course, a creative course, if I were to create something like that, can I be realistic about how long it takes? Do I really have the capacity to do that right now? If I am going to do it, what's the best way for me to do that? Where should I host it? What are some things I should offer? How should I structure one-on-one time with, the people that buy the course? How can I make it something that grows and gets enhanced every year? And how can I meet the needs of people who maybe are willing to pay a little bit more for more one-on-one access to me versus people who are like, I'm happy just doing it self-paced. Like, I don't really care. Like, I just need to learn. So I think about that too. And that's something that, maybe in the next 6 months you might see come into fruition in my own life. But those are kind of some of the things that, I've definitely thought about. And it's been nice to explore on Creative Architects. Will there be crossover in the future? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, that's so cool. I love the fact that you're doing all this thinking about it, but also, yeah, focusing on the sustainability, because you mentioned before when you ended up outsourcing your editing to someone, it was such a relief. And I think that is one way that we can help, ensure that what we're doing is sustainable, is acknowledging that we have our own limits and we can't do everything and still have our regular jobs and a social life and our family, and wear like it's so many hats. Something's got to give along the way.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And let's quickly, before we go, I would love to talk a little bit about your own creativity, because you're videographer and you make documentaries. And tell me about that. How did you get into that?
I got into it like super organically and selfishly. I picked up a camera after I went to Spain. I did a study abroad trip in Spain in 2014. So coming up on 10 years now, the anniversary of that, which is crazy.
Wow.
But I picked up a camera after that because after I got back from Spain, my phone like factory reset itself. So I have no pictures from that original trip.
Oh.
And I was like, never again. I paid all this money. I spent all this time. I had so many great memories. And now I have nothing to show for it. And I was like, I'm never going to let that happen again. I've got the bug. Like, I want to travel more. I want to document my life. And so I worked all summer and I spent my check on a camera, which is not sound financial advice, but creatively, I didn't care. I just wanted a camera to have around with me. And that's kind of how I got started. And then maybe my senior year of college, my friends were like, yo, Angela, you could make some money. Like, you could, start selling graduation portrait sessions and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, I don't know if people will pay for it. But they did. And that was kind of how things got going a little bit. I did my first wedding in September of 2016. And for me at the time, still being a fairly novice photographer, I was like, oh, this is like the pinnacle, because when weddings, you can't miss, they can't repeat that day just because you missed a shot. So I started taking myself a little more seriously, and I started the first iteration of the business then. And yeah, I just kind of kept growing. And once I graduated from college and started thinking like, okay, what do I actually want to do with my life? Like, how do I actually want to make money? And I started thinking like, and seeing that there were just so few people that did photo and video, because we were still kind of on the early ages of video and DSLR being accessible, right? For like everyday people who couldn't afford a $10,000 cinema camera. So I started thinking seriously about like, okay, if I could do photo and video really well, I could name my own price. And so that's what I did. I just started learning and growing as kind of a hybrid photo and video person. Still am a hybrid photo and video person, but now I kind of keep photography to myself. I actually just splurged on this little like everyday camera.
Nice.
Um, for people who are listening and not watching, I just showed like this overpriced camera that I paid for. But anyways,
Yeah.
yeah, I just feel like it's so essential, especially now. You got to think I started that company in 2016, and now it's 2023. So it's been over 7 years, and there's a part of me that's always just like going back to like I just want to document my life. I just want to document the cool things that are going on and that are important to me, like my family, my friends, the place that I live, the places that get to go and blessed to go for work and for pleasure. And I'm largely able to keep photography for me. I get to photograph on my own terms. I get to hang out with people on my own terms. And I think there's always some element of me that will always want that. And even now, I love creating at the level that I'm creating at. It feels great. But there's also, again, like even in my career now, it's less about like, okay, how can I make the most money being a hybrid photographer, filmmaker, or a filmmaker podcast, but more about like, how can I make money doing the things that I care about, right? And doing things that are interesting to me. And so I think that Creative Architects, Honey and Hustle, all the documentaries that I'm working on are wonderful examples of that maturation over time.
That's cool. And it all makes sense why you have a video podcast now.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh no, that is so cool. I absolutely just loved picking your brains today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Yeah. And I also want to thank everyone who's tuned into Creativity Uncovered today. I really hope that this episode has inspired you to, just do more of what you love. It obviously is working. And as always, I hope that it helps you summon creativity the next time that you need it. If you've made it this far, a huge thank you for your support and tuning into today's episode. Creativity Uncovered has been lovingly recorded on the land of the Cubby Cubby people, and we pay our respect to elders past, present, and emerging. This podcast has been produced by my amazing team here at Crisp Communications, and the music you just heard was composed by James Gatling. If you liked this episode, please do share it around and help us on our mission to unlock more creativity in this world. You can also hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episode releases.